I don't need to tell you where I'm going. My girlfriend said it while slipping on her jacket. I remember the exact moment because of how casually she said it. Like I was asking for something unreasonable. Like I was the problem. I looked at her for a second, then I nodded. Okay. 3 months later, she was sitting in my apartment crying, asking why I had changed. The truth was simple. I hadn't changed. I had just stopped chasing. My name is Ryan. I'm 32 years old. I work as a logistics manager for a regional manufacturing company. Nothing glamorous, nothing exciting. But it pays well. I own my condo. My bills are paid. My retirement account grows every month. My weekends are usually predictable. Gym, groceries, laundry, football when it's in season. I like predictable. Predictable is peaceful. For a long time, I thought Emily liked predictable too. Emily was 29. We met through mutual friends almost 3 years ago. She worked in marketing. Smart, funny, confident. The kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 10 new friends. I admired that about her. Where I was reserved, she was social. Where I planned everything. She preferred spontaneity. At first it felt balanced, like we completed each other's missing pieces. The first year was genuinely good. We traveled, went to concerts, took weekend road trips, spent holidays together. Talked about eventually buying a house. Talked about marriage. Nothing felt forced. Nothing felt broken. Looking back now, the warning signs were there. They just arrived so slowly I barely noticed them. The first one was communication. Not bad communication, selective communication. Emily always wanted updates from me. If I was running late from work, she'd text, "Where are you?" If I stopped for gas on the way home, she'd ask, "Everything okay?" If I went to dinner with co-workers. She wanted details. Who was there? How late? Which restaurant? I never cared. It seemed normal. We were together. Sharing information wasn't a burden. Then something interesting happened. The rules stopped applying both ways. At first it was small. She'd mentioned plans after they happened. Oh, I grabbed drinks with Ashley after work. Okay, no issue. Then it became, I went downtown with some friends. Oh, then, I was out late last night. Eventually it became, I'll be home later. No explanation, no details, just statements. Whenever I asked simple questions, she acted irritated, not angry, just mildly annoyed, like I was creating unnecessary paperwork. One Friday evening about 18 months into our relationship, we were making dinner together, or technically I was making dinner while she sat on the counter scrolling through her phone. Any plans tomorrow? I asked. She shrugged. Maybe brunch. With who? Friends. Which friends? She looked up. Why? No reason, just asking. Probably Ashley and Megan. The answer wasn't rude, but something about the delivery felt defensive. I ignored it. Relationships require trust. At least that's what I told myself. The next year followed a similar pattern. Nothing dramatic, no huge fights, no obvious betrayal, just tiny moments that always left me feeling slightly confused, like stepping onto a stair that isn't there. One moment stands out. We attended a birthday party for one of her co-workers. About 20 people showed up. Most of them were strangers to me. The night was fine, until someone asked how long we'd been together. Almost 2 years, I said. The coworker smiled. Wow, serious relationship. Before I could answer, Emily laughed. Ryan's basically a golden retriever. He'd stay forever. Everyone laughed, including me, because what else was I supposed to do? But later that night, the comment bothered me, not because it was cruel, because it felt revealing. Like she saw my loyalty as something amusing, something guaranteed, something automatic. I mentioned it during the drive home. You know that joke earlier? What joke? The golden retriever thing. Oh my God. She rolled her eyes. You're not upset about that. Not upset, just curious. It was a joke. Okay. You take things too seriously sometimes. That phrase became familiar. You take things too seriously. I heard it whenever I brought up something uncomfortable. Whenever I expressed concern. Whenever I wanted clarification. Eventually, I stopped bringing things up. Not because the issues disappeared, because discussing them never went anywhere. Every conversation somehow ended with me defending my feelings instead of discussing the original issue. About 6 months before everything collapsed, Emily became close with a new coworker. Her name was Lauren. Lauren was single, very social, always traveling, always posting pictures from bars, rooftops, festivals, and weekend getaways. Emily talked about her constantly. At first, I didn't think much of it. Then Lauren started appearing everywhere. Girls' nights, weekend brunches, after-work drinks, birthday events, Sunday afternoon shopping trips. If Emily was out, Lauren was usually involved. I met her twice. Both times she seemed perfectly friendly, but there was something about her attitude that rubbed me the wrong way. Not hostile, dismissive, like relationships were temporary inconveniences. The second time we met, the three of us grabbed coffee. Lauren asked how long we'd been together. Almost 3 years, Emily said. Lauren whistled. Wow, that's commitment. Emily laughed. Tell me about it. Again, everyone laughed, including me. But that familiar feeling returned, that tiny sting, that sense of being the punchline. A month later, Emily started staying out later, not constantly, just enough to notice. One Thursday she texted me around 7, out with Lauren, home later. I replied, okay. 10 o'clock came, then 11, then midnight. She finally walked through the door around 12:30. I was still awake watching television. Fun night. Yeah. She kicked off her shoes. Lauren got promoted. Nice. Yeah, that was it. No details, no story, no conversation. The next morning I asked where they celebrated. Why? Just curious, she sighed. A rooftop place downtown. Sounds fun. It was. Then she disappeared into the bathroom. Conversation over. The pattern repeated. Not every week, not every day, just enough. Enough for me to notice. Enough for me to wonder. Not enough to justify a fight. That's what made it so frustrating. Nothing individually looked serious, but collectively, something felt different, like I was slowly being moved further away from my own relationship. About 3 months before the moment that changed everything. We attended a barbecue hosted by one of my friends. Most of the people there were couples. Halfway through the afternoon, my friend Matt pulled me aside. Can I ask something? Sure. You and Emily okay? Yeah, why? He hesitated. Just seems like she's somewhere else lately. I frowned. What do you mean? Nothing specific, he shrugged. Just a vibe. I laughed it off. But his comments stayed with me, because he'd noticed it too, not the details, the distance, the feeling. That night, after we got home, Emily spent almost an hour scrolling through her phone while we sat together on the couch. I don't mean checking messages. I mean completely absorbed, smiling, typing, scrolling, repeating. Eventually, I said, everything okay? Yeah, you seem busy. Just talking. To who? She looked up immediately. The expression lasted less than a second, but I saw it. Annoyance. People, I nodded. Okay. Then went back to watching television. The following weeks felt strange. Not bad, not good, just disconnected. Like we were roommates wearing relationship costumes. Then came the Saturday afternoon that I now think of as the beginning. The real beginning, not the ending, the beginning. We were standing in the kitchen. I was putting groceries away. Emily was getting ready to leave. Black jacket, white sneakers, phone in hand. She looked nice. Doing anything fun? I asked. Maybe, I smiled. Mysterious. Not really. Where are you headed? That was it. A normal question. A question I'd answered 1,000 times myself. She zipped up her jacket, then looked directly at me and said, I don't need to tell you where I'm going. The room went quiet. Not physically, emotionally, like something invisible had shifted. I remember staring at her, waiting for the smile, waiting for the joke, waiting for her to realize how ridiculous that sounded. Instead, she crossed her arms. What? Nothing. You look annoyed. I just asked where you were going, and I answered. No, I did. There was irritation in her voice now, sharp irritation, the kind that appears when someone thinks they're being challenged. Ryan, you're not my father. I blinked. I know. I don't need permission to go somewhere. I wasn't asking for permission. Then why does it matter? The question caught me off guard, because I genuinely didn't have an answer. not one she'd accept. Why does it matter? Because we're together, because couples communicate, because I care, because sharing your life is kind of the point. Instead, I just said, okay. She grabbed her purse. Good, then walked out. The door closed behind her. And for the first time in almost 3 years together, I sat alone in my own kitchen and wondered whether I actually knew the person I was planning a future with. That night, she didn't come home until after 1 in the morning. And something inside me became very, very quiet. The strange thing about that conversation wasn't what Emily said. It was what happened afterward. Nothing. No apology, no follow-up, no explanation. She came home around 1:15 in the morning, kicked off her shoes, plugged in her phone, and climbed into bed like we'd never had the conversation. I was awake, not because I was waiting for her, because I couldn't sleep. She slid under the blankets. You're still up? Yeah. Why? Couldn't sleep, she nodded. Okay. Then rolled over. That was it. No mention of where she'd been. No mention of why she'd been gone 7 hours. No mention of the argument. The next morning she acted completely normal, which somehow made it worse. We had breakfast, watched part of a movie, went grocery shopping. On the surface, everything looked fine, but something had changed. For the first time, I stopped filling in the blanks for her, stopped making excuses, stopped telling myself I was overreacting. Because the truth was simple. A person who wants you involved in their life doesn't get angry when you ask where they're going. They just answer. Monday morning, I left for work at 7. Emily was still asleep. She'd been staying up later recently. Scrolling, texting, watching videos, I wasn't sure, maybe all three. At lunch, I got a text. Emily, need anything from Target. I stared at it. Normal message, normal relationship, normal girlfriend. But now every interaction felt strange. Like looking at a familiar photograph after learning it had been edited. Ryan, no thanks. Emily, okay. That night she came home around 6, for the first time in weeks. Early. She seemed unusually cheerful, talking about work. Talking about a client presentation, talking about Lauren, always Lauren. Eventually she sat beside me on the couch. You're quiet. Tired. You seem annoyed. I'm not. You sure? I nodded. She studied me, almost suspiciously. Then went back to her phone. I didn't realize it then. But that was the beginning of something important. Emily was perfectly comfortable when I asked questions. What bothered her was when I stopped. The following Friday she announced she was going out again, not asked, announced. I'm grabbing drinks after work. Okay, she paused. I kept reading. A few seconds passed. Then she said, with Lauren. I looked up. Sounds fun. Another pause. That's all. What do you mean? I don't know, she shrugged. You usually ask stuff. Oh, I returned to my book. Have fun. Something flashed across her face, not satisfaction, confusion. Then she left. Around 9 that evening, I received another text. Emily, probably gonna stay out later. Ryan, okay. 10 minutes later. Emily, you don't care. I stared at the screen, read it twice, then laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. 3 weeks earlier, she'd practically told me I had no right to ask questions. Now she was asking why I wasn't asking questions. Ryan, you said you don't need to tell me where you're going. No response. 20 minutes later. Emily. That's not what I meant. Ryan, okay. The conversation ended there. When she came home around midnight, she seemed irritated. Not at me, at something. Maybe the conversation, maybe herself, maybe the fact that the old dynamic wasn't working anymore. The next few weeks followed a strange pattern. Whenever I gave her space, she seemed bothered. Whenever I respected the boundary she'd created, she pushed against it. One night she walked into the living room dressed for a night out. Black dress. Heels, hair done, the kind of effort people notice. She stood near the television, waiting. I could feel it, waiting for a reaction. I looked up. Have fun. She didn't move. Finally she said, that's it. What? You don't think I look nice? I set my laptop down. You look great. Then why didn't you say anything? I almost smiled. Because 6 months ago I absolutely would have chased that conversation, would have tried figuring out the correct answer, the right response, the proper reassurance. Now I was just tired. I just did. She grabbed her purse. Forget it, then left. When the door closed, I sat there staring at the wall, trying to understand what was happening, because none of this felt healthy, not for her. Not for me, not for us. A few days later, my friend Matt called. We'd known each other since college, one of those friendships that survives regardless of how busy life gets. You free Saturday? Probably. Come watch the game. Sure. Saturday afternoon, I headed to his house. About 6 guys showed up, mostly married, mostly exhausted, the usual. Halfway through the second quarter, Matt handed me a beer. How's Emily? The question sounded casual. It wasn't, I could tell. Fine. He nodded slowly. Then, you sure? I looked at him. Why? He hesitated. Because every time I ask about her lately, you answer like a hostage. I laughed despite myself. That obvious? A little. I considered lying. Instead, I told him the truth. Not everything, just enough. The communication issues, the defensiveness, the weird arguments, the distance. Matt listened quietly. When I finished, he said something simple. Something I couldn't stop thinking about afterward. Man, relationships get weird when one person starts expecting effort they don't give. That sentence followed me home, because it perfectly described what I'd been feeling. Sunday evening, Emily was sitting at the kitchen counter scrolling through Instagram. I was cooking. Eventually she asked, "What are you doing next weekend?" "No idea. You usually have plans." "Not really. You could come with me and Lauren." I looked over. The invitation surprised me. "Where?" "Brunch." "Sure." For a moment she looked relieved. Then she added, "And some of her friends." There it was, the hesitation, the detail added afterward, the thing she almost didn't mention. Okay, the brunch happened the following Saturday. And honestly, that's where things became impossible to ignore. Lauren brought 4 friends, 3 women, 1 guy. A guy named Brandon, tall, confident, very social. The kind of person who somehow knows everyone. Throughout the meal, Brandon and Emily kept bouncing jokes off each other. Nothing inappropriate, nothing obvious, just familiarity. A lot of familiarity, enough that I eventually asked, "How long have you two known each other?" Lauren answered before Emily could. "Oh, they've been friends forever." Emily shot her a look, a quick one, but I caught it. Forever, interesting word, because I'd never heard his name before, not once. 3 years together, not once. The rest of brunch felt strange, not because of Brandon, because of Emily. She seemed nervous, like she was monitoring the conversation, trying to steer it, control it. When we got home, I finally asked, "How do you know Brandon?" "Work stuff." Lauren said you've known him forever. She was exaggerating. "Oh, why?" "No reason." Immediately her shoulders tightened. "There doesn't always have to be a reason." I stared at her. Because that sentence had become a pattern. Any question, any curiosity, any follow-up, instant defensiveness. Eventually she sighed dramatically. "God, Ryan, what? You're doing it again." "Doing what?" Interrogating me. The word hit me harder than it should have. Interrogating. As if asking how she knew someone was unreasonable. As if basic conversation was an attack. I walked away before the argument could continue, because I already knew how it ended. Every single time. Somehow I became the problem. That night I couldn't sleep, not because of Brandon, because of the pattern, the constant reversal, the endless rewriting of reality. Question, defensiveness, blame, repeat. Around midnight I walked into the kitchen for water. Emily was sitting on the couch, phone glowing in the dark. The moment she noticed me, she flipped it over, fast, too fast. I stopped. She looked up. "What?" "Nothing. You were staring." I wasn't. The lie arrived instantly, automatic, reflexive, and for the first time something uncomfortable settled into my chest. Not jealousy, not suspicion, recognition. I was being managed, not loved, managed, kept at a distance. Fed information selectively, punished when I asked questions, rewarded when I stayed quiet. The realization was ugly, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The next week was worse, not because Emily changed. Because I finally stopped ignoring it. Every interaction felt different. Every conversation exposed another crack. Then came the dinner with her sister. The moment, everything accelerated. Her older sister Rachel invited us over on a Thursday night. Small family dinner, nothing special. Rachel was one of the few people in Emily's family I genuinely liked. Practical, direct, no drama. Halfway through dinner, Rachel asked, "So when are you two getting serious?" Emily laughed. "We are serious." "You know what I mean," Rachel smiled. "Marriage." I expected Emily to laugh it off. Instead, she said, "I don't know." The room went quiet. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Rachel blinked. "What do you mean you don't know?" Emily shrugged. "Just don't know." Rachel looked at me, then back at her, then wisely changed the subject, but the damage was done. The entire drive home was silent. Finally, I said, "What was that?" "What was what?" "You saying you don't know." "I don't know what you're talking about." I actually laughed, a short, disbelieving laugh. "You literally said you don't know if we're getting married." She crossed her arms. "You're twisting my words." "No." "Yes." "No." She stared out the window. Then came the sentence, the one that finally showed me exactly where we were heading. "If you need constant reassurance, that's your issue." I gripped the steering wheel, and suddenly everything became very clear. I wasn't asking for reassurance. I was asking for honesty, and she either couldn't tell the difference or didn't want to. When we got home, she went straight to bed. I stayed in the living room for nearly 2 hours, thinking, replaying, connecting dots. Not because I suspected cheating, because I suspected something almost worse. Disrespect. The slow kind. The kind that builds for months. The kind that convinces someone you'll never leave. The kind that makes them stop caring how their actions affect you. Around 1 in the morning, I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not a final one, just a simple decision. I was done chasing clarity from someone committed to confusion. The next afternoon, Emily walked into the kitchen holding her phone. "We need to talk." I looked up. "Okay." She folded her arms. "If you're going to keep acting weird every time I go somewhere, maybe we're not compatible." I said nothing. She continued, "If you don't trust me, maybe we shouldn't be together." There it was, the ultimatum, delivered calmly, confidently, like she expected me to panic, expected me to apologize, expected me to fight for us. Instead, I just looked at her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt absolutely calm. I expected to feel angry after Emily's ultimatum. I expected frustration, maybe sadness. Instead, I felt relief. Not because I wanted the relationship to end, because for the first time in months, everything made sense. The confusion was gone. The endless guessing was gone. The constant effort to understand someone who didn't want to be understood was gone. She'd finally said it out loud. "If you don't trust me, maybe we shouldn't be together." The interesting part. I never said I didn't trust her. She did. I just asked questions, questions she didn't want to answer. There was a difference, but I was done explaining that difference. Emily stood in the kitchen waiting for me to defend myself, waiting for me to reassure her, waiting for the version of Ryan she'd grown used to, the one who always tried harder, the one who always fixed things, the one who always chased. Instead, I nodded. "Okay." Her expression changed instantly. Not dramatically, just enough. "What? Okay. What do you mean okay, if that's how you feel?" For the first time since the conversation started, she looked uncertain. "I don't think you're understanding." "I understand." "No," she shook her head. "I mean we need to work on things." "Then let's work on things." "That's not." She stopped, because even she wasn't sure where the argument was supposed to go anymore. I wasn't fighting. I wasn't begging. I wasn't apologizing. The script had changed. And she hadn't prepared for that version. Eventually, she rolled her eyes. "Whatever," then walked away. I watched her disappear into the bedroom and realized something important. The relationship hadn't changed. I had, not emotionally, behaviorally. I stopped participating in games I didn't enjoy. That weekend became a test, not intentionally. It just happened. Saturday morning, Emily announced she was meeting friends. No details, no explanation, just another vague statement. 3 months earlier, I would have asked follow-up questions. Now, I simply nodded. "Okay." She stood there for a moment, waiting. Then, "You're not gonna ask." I looked up from my coffee. Ask what? Who I'm meeting? You said you're meeting friends. Yeah, sounds good. Silence. Then, you're being weird. I smiled slightly. Maybe. She left 10 minutes later. The door closed, and for the first time in a very long time, I enjoyed having the apartment to myself, not because she was gone. Because the tension was gone, no monitoring moods, no walking on eggshells, no wondering whether a simple question would become an argument, just peace. That afternoon I called Matt. You busy? Not really. Wanna grab lunch? Sure. 2 hours later we were sitting at a sports bar downtown. After catching up for a while he leaned back. So, I laughed. So, what's happening? I told him everything, not just pieces, everything, the arguments, the dismissiveness. The constant defensiveness, the ultimatum, the confusion, the exhaustion. By the time I finished, Matt was quiet. Then he said something that hit harder than he probably intended. Man, what? You don't sound like you're in a relationship. I frowned. What do you mean? You sound like you're managing one. That stayed with me, managing one, because that's exactly what it felt like, not partnership, maintenance, constant maintenance, always adjusting, always accommodating. Always explaining, always carrying, never arriving. When I got home later that evening, Emily was already there, curled up on the couch, phone in hand. Lauren's name appeared on the screen for a split second before she locked it. A month ago I would have noticed, now I barely cared. How was lunch? Good. With Matt? Yeah, she nodded, then casually asked, what you guys talk about? I almost laughed, because the irony was incredible. She wanted details, specifics. Information, exactly the things she'd spent months refusing to provide. We watched the game. That's it, pretty much. She stared at me, clearly annoyed, but she couldn't call me out, not without calling herself out. The next week brought another shift, small but important. Emily started checking in more. At first it seemed innocent. What time will you be home? You working late? Where are you? Who are you with? Simple questions, normal questions. The same kinds of questions I've been asking for years. The difference, now she was asking, and I noticed something fascinating. She became irritated whenever my answers matched hers. Out with friends. What friends? Just friends. Seriously. I shrugged. You don't like that answer. Her face tightened. You're doing that thing again. What thing? You know exactly what thing. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Either way, I wasn't interested in playing anymore. Around the same time, another issue surfaced. Money, not major money, just patterns. Emily had always been somewhat careless financially, nothing disastrous, but definitely impulsive. A new handbag, last-minute trips, random purchases. I usually didn't care. We kept separate finances. My money was mine, her money was hers. Simple. Then one evening she mentioned something casually, too casually. Lauren was planning a weekend trip, 3 days, luxury resort, wine tour, spa packages, the works. Sounds expensive, Emily shrugged. It'll be fun. When? Next month. Cool. That should have been the end of it, but something bothered me, not the trip, the assumption, the expectation, the fact she'd already committed before mentioning it. Again, the same pattern, decision first, discussion later, or never. That night I sat on the balcony thinking about the last year. The more I thought about it, the clearer things became. The problem wasn't one argument, one friend, one trip, one comment. The problem was accumulation. Thousands of tiny moments, tiny cuts, tiny dismissals, tiny reminders that my thoughts mattered less than hers, individually harmless, collectively devastating. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Rachel called me, Emily's sister. We'd never really talked one-on-one before. Can I ask you something? Sure. You okay? The question caught me off guard. Why? She hesitated, then sighed. Because Emily's been complaining about you. Interesting. What about? She says you've changed. I smiled. Have I? That's what I'm asking. For nearly an hour we talked. Carefully, respectfully, no trash talking, no accusations. Just conversation. Near the end, Rachel said something important. Can I be honest? Always. I think Emily got comfortable. Comfortable. Too comfortable. She paused. She assumes you'll always be there. That sentence landed like a brick. Because it matched exactly what I'd been feeling. Not loved, guaranteed, not appreciated, expected. There's a difference, a huge difference. And once you feel it, you can't ignore it. The following Friday, the first real crack appeared. Emily came home furious. Not at me, at work. Apparently Lauren had convinced her to join some expensive group vacation package. Now the organizer wanted deposits immediately. Several $1,000s, non-refundable. Emily paced the living room ranting, "This is ridiculous. Sounds frustrating." "It is." She sat down heavily, then looked at me. "I might need help." There it was, the sentence, the one I knew was coming. "Help, just temporarily." I stayed quiet. She continued, "I'll pay you back." Now, 6 months earlier, I would have transferred the money immediately, no questions asked. Not because I had to, because I cared. But things were different now. Not because I was punishing her. Because I was paying attention. "When did you book it?" "Couple weeks ago." "You already committed?" "Yeah," I nodded. "So you committed before knowing how you'd pay for it?" Her face hardened immediately. "Are you serious right now?" "Just asking." The exact phrase she'd used countless times. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. That argument lasted nearly 40 minutes. Not because I fought, because she couldn't believe I wasn't immediately solving the problem. Eventually, she stormed off, slamming the bedroom door. And for the first time in our relationship, I didn't follow her, didn't knock, didn't fix it, didn't chase. The next morning, she barely spoke to me. By Sunday, she was acting normal again, as if nothing had happened. But I noticed something. She was watching me, studying me, trying to figure out what changed, trying to figure out why the old buttons no longer worked. Then came the moment that truly scared her. 2 weeks later, my company offered me something unexpected. A promotion, regional operations role, better pay, more responsibility, different city, not far, about 90 minutes away, close enough to visit, far enough to move. My boss gave me 3 weeks to decide. I didn't tell Emily immediately, not intentionally. I just wanted time to think, time to process, time to decide what I actually wanted. 3 days later, she found the paperwork on my desk. And panic flashed across her face for the first time. Real panic. "What is this?" I looked up. "The promotion offer. You didn't tell me." "I was going to." "When?" "When I decided." She stared at me. "You're considering moving?" "Maybe." The silence stretched. "Then, you'd leave?" The question surprised me, not because she asked, because of how she asked it, like the possibility had never occurred to her, like leaving wasn't something I was allowed to do. I looked directly at her and calmly said, "I guess that depends on where things are heading." For the first time in 3 years, Emily had no response, and later that night, after she thought I was asleep, I heard her crying quietly in the bathroom. The morning after I heard Emily crying in the bathroom, she acted like nothing had happened. That was her pattern. Ignore, deflect, reset, pretend. For almost 3 years it worked, because I always met her halfway, sometimes more than halfway. This time was different. I had stopped carrying both sides of the relationship, and she could feel it. The promotion became the center of everything, not because I talked about it, because I didn't. Emily brought it up constantly. "What are you thinking?" "I don't know." "When do you have to decide?" "Couple weeks." "You'd actually move?" "Maybe." Every answer frustrated her, because she wanted certainty, the same certainty she'd denied me for months. One evening she finally snapped. We were eating dinner, quietly, like roommates. She set her fork down. "I don't understand what you're doing." "What do you mean?" "This." She waved her hand. "Everything." I waited. "You're distant." "Okay." "You don't tell me anything." I nearly laughed. Instead, I took a sip of water, then said, "Interesting." "What does that mean?" "Nothing." "No." Her voice sharpened. "Say it." I looked directly at her. "You spent months telling me I didn't need to know things." Her expression changed. Instantly. "There it is." "What?" "The scorecard." I nodded slowly. "No." "Then what is it?" "The consequences." Silence. Not angry silence. Heavy silence. The kind that arrives when someone finally hears a truth they can't argue with. She pushed her chair back. I'm done having this conversation. Then walked away. I let her go. 3 months ago I would have followed. Not anymore. A week later I attended a company leadership conference. 2 days, different city, mostly meetings, networking, workshops, boring stuff. The first night my phone buzzed repeatedly. Emily. Then again, I finally answered. Hey. Where are you? I smiled despite myself. Conference. I know that. Okay. I mean right now. Hotel. What hotel? The irony was almost painful. For years I'd asked basic questions and gotten treated like an interrogator. Now she was asking them and expecting answers. Why? What do you mean why? I leaned back on the hotel bed. Just curious. Silence. Then, this isn't funny. No, it isn't. The conversation ended a minute later. But something important happened. For the first time, she experienced what she'd been giving me, and she hated it. When I returned home, things felt different, more tense, more fragile, like both of us knew something major was approaching. Neither of us wanted to say it. Then Lauren made a mistake, not a cheating mistake, not an affair, a truth mistake, the kind that slips out accidentally. Emily and I attended Lauren's birthday party, mostly co-workers, friends, a rented rooftop venue. About 30 people. At one point I found myself standing near Lauren and two of her friends. Emily had stepped away to take a phone call. Lauren had been drinking, not heavily, just enough. One of her friends asked, "How's Emily doing?" Lauren laughed. "Honestly, she's freaking out." I looked over. "What do you mean?" Lauren immediately realized she'd said too much. "Nothing." "No," I smiled politely. "What did you mean?" She hesitated. Then, "She didn't think you'd actually pull away." The words landed harder than she realized. I stayed calm. "What?" Lauren looked uncomfortable now. "Forget it." But it was too late. The truth was already out. She didn't think I'd actually pull away. Just like Melissa in that other story, just like every person who gets too comfortable. They don't think the other person has limits. They think loyalty is infinite. That conversation haunted me all night, not because it hurt, because it clarified everything. Emily never thought I would leave, never thought I'd stop chasing, never thought I'd stop carrying the relationship. That realization changed something, not emotionally, practically. The following Monday, I accepted the promotion. I signed the paperwork. New role, new city, new office, start date, 6 weeks. I didn't tell Emily immediately. Again, not out of spite, because I wanted a plan first. Apartment options, moving logistics, salary details, everything. A few days later, she discovered the signed contract, and this time the panic wasn't subtle. "What is this?" I looked up from my laptop. "You already know. You signed it." "Yeah." "You accepted." "Yes." The color drained from her face. "You didn't even discuss it with me." I stared at her, genuinely stunned. "Then, discuss it." "Yes." "We discuss major life decisions." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. For a moment I couldn't even respond. Finally I said, "Really?" Her jaw tightened. Don't. Don't what?" "Don't make this about me." I laughed. Actually laughed, not meanly, not cruelly, just disbelief. The sound seemed to shake her more than yelling would have. Because I never laughed during arguments. Never. She started crying. Immediately, suddenly, like a switch. And for the first time in years I didn't rush to comfort her, not because I didn't care, because I understood something. Tears don't automatically mean accountability. Sometimes they mean fear. Fear of consequences, fear of losing control, fear of change. She cried for nearly 20 minutes, then finally said it. The truth, not all of it. Enough. I didn't think this would happen. "What?" "This," she gestured between us. "You leaving." There it was, finally, not love, not loss, leaving. She never thought I'd do it. The next week Rachel called again. Apparently Emily had been venting a lot. To everyone, friends, family, co-workers, the story was always similar. Ryan changed. Ryan became cold. Ryan stopped caring. Ryan was abandoning the relationship, but Rachel had noticed something. So I asked her one question. What question? "What changed first?" I stayed quiet. Rachel continued. You know what she said? What? Nothing. I smiled sadly, because that was the problem. Emily genuinely believed nothing changed. From her perspective, everything had always been normal. The dismissiveness, the secrecy, the double standards, the entitlement, normal. The relationship had been tilted for so long she no longer noticed. Then came the confrontation. The real one, not an argument, not a fight, a conversation. The final conversation, 2 weeks before my move. Emily asked me to sit down. No phones, no distractions, just us. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she finally said, "Are you leaving me?" Simple question, direct question, honest question. For the first time in months, I appreciated that, so I gave her an honest answer. "I think you left a long time ago." Tears filled her eyes. "I never cheated on you." "I know." The words surprised her. She blinked. "What? I know." "Then why?" I took a deep breath, because now she genuinely wanted the answer. Not an argument, the answer, so I gave it. "You stopped treating me like a partner." She stared silently. "You treated communication like a burden." Silence. "You expected transparency from me but refused to give it." Silence. "You dismissed concerns." Silence. "You turned every conversation into my fault." Tears rolled down her face. I kept going, not angrily, calmly, truthfully. "The day you said you didn't need to tell me where you were going." I paused. Something broke. Neither of us spoke. The room felt incredibly still. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't mean it like that." "I know." "Then why couldn't we fix it?" Because the answer was painfully simple. Because you didn't realize it mattered until I stopped chasing. And deep down, she knew I was right. For nearly an hour we talked, honestly. Maybe for the first time in a year. No blame, no games, no gaslighting, just reality. By the end, both of us were crying, not dramatically, quietly. Like two people mourning something that had died slowly. When I stood up, she grabbed my hand. "Please," I looked at her, "don't go." And for a second, just a second, I wished she'd said that 6 months earlier, but timing matters. And some realizations arrived too late. 3 weeks later, I loaded the last box into my car. Emily stood beside the parking lot crying, not begging anymore, just watching, understanding. The relationship wasn't ending because of one sentence. It was ending because of hundreds, hundreds of moments, hundreds of choices, hundreds of opportunities ignored. I hugged her. She hugged me back. Then I got into my car, started the engine, and drove toward a new city, a new life, and a future she never believed I'd choose.